For a long time, I didn't understand why some people were clamoring for a remake of Resident Evil 4, the game that changed the Resident Evil franchise drastically, for better or worse. I didn't really get it. The game is only 16 years old? Oh man, I'm getting old. What's widely regarded as Capcom's worst-kept secret these days, reports are that the Resident Evil 4 remake is getting overhauled. It's interesting to hear this, as the game hasn't even been officially announced yet. Is it due to the criticisms that the Resident Evil 3 remake took too many liberties with the original, while leaving out too much content from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis? Either way, I decided to fire up a recent save of Resident Evil 4 HD I have been playing through during the pandemic, and well, yeah. Now that I've played it with a bit more context, the game could use a remake. Just saying though, Capcom, if this happens but Onimusha 5 doesn't, you guys are going on my list. But without further ado, here's 5 things we need in the Resident Evil 4 remake. Number 1. The cutting room floor. One of the biggest issues with the Resident Evil 3 remake is how several sections of the original game were changed, or straight up removed from the remake of Resident Evil 3. With Resident Evil 4 being a game celebrated by Resident Evil, horror, and action game fans alike, a remake needs to be at least on par with the quality and content of the Resident Evil 2 remake. Things like the entire clock tower sequence, branching pathways, even random encounters with Nemesis were completely cut from RE3. I feel like the game was slimmed down to ride on the coattails of the RE2 remake's success. Not saying I didn't enjoy the RE3 remake, because I did. A lot, actually. It felt like playing a blockbuster movie, and after learning the ins and outs of the game, it was one of the only games I've ever tried speedrunning in a sense. However, with how game-changing Resident Evil 4 was when it first came out, it would feel odd having any of its content cut. Imagine not having the encounter with Del Lago, or El Gigante. While I'm not against these encounters being reimagined, whether it be what point in the game they take place in, or the gameplay mechanics you use to defeat them, they should be included as they were iconic moments in the original. Number 2. The cutting room floor's cutting room floor. While we're at it, the original Resident Evil 4 had a really interesting development cycle, with multiple versions of the game being straight up canned and brought back to the drawing board. One scrapped mechanic had Leon fighting paranormal enemies that would cause the camera to shake and create odd effects. This reminds me of the various mind tricks from the GameCube title Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. The other inclusion I'd be interested in seeing is the addition of the Hookman. Like Resident Evil 3's Nemesis, the Hookman was an enemy that would stalk Leon persistently through the environment, with a look more reminiscent of Clock Tower's Scissorman. While only a few minutes of gameplay from these older versions exist, it is obvious that some things were brought over to the final game, like the shambling suits of armor. With the unreleased Xbox Live Arcade port of GoldenEye 007 leaking to the public the other week, it's not without hope that someday we could see a playable version of what the original Resident Evil 4 was like. Better yet, why not bring back some of those unused ideas? Food for thought, Capcom. Number 3. The Brooding Biologist. One of the MVPs of Resident Evil 4 was Luis Serra. The Los Illuminado biologist turned defector always had an endearing mystique to him, in my opinion. It's sad, though, that our new acquaintance is so quickly dispatched by Sadler. So long, Luis, we barely knew ya. But what if we did know him better? Why not give our friend Luis his own playable section? This could take place before Leon gets to Spain, as well as explore his exploits in Resident Evil 4 more in depth. It doesn't need to be lengthy either, I just think it could be a nice way to break up the proceedings. Number 4. Separately, Together. Speaking of breaking up proceedings, Resident Evil 4 was fondly remembered for having multiple unlockable modes within the game, including the Mercenaries mode and Separate Ways. I think a great way the Resident Evil 4 remake could stand out is by integrating the Separate Ways campaign, which takes place in parallel to the main Resident Evil 4 campaign, into the main campaign. Doing this could break up the pace of the game significantly, and bouncing back and forth between Leon, Ada, and Ashley could add in some variety, while reimagining the game for old and new crowds alike. Heck, you could even add in Luisa's segment and have 4 playable characters in the main campaign, if you really wanted to switch things up, Capcom. Number 5. Up your arsenal. Resident Evil 4 has a memorable set of weapons for our protagonist to collect and upgrade throughout the game. And while that's great and all, the inclusion of a few new arms to collect and upgrade could be a welcome addition. One arm in particular that's missing from Leon's arsenal is the Samurai Edge, the iconic Beretta 92F carried by many members of STARS. So yeah, Leon's not a member of STARS, but by the time Resident Evil 4 rolls around, he's a seasoned veteran. I could imagine that he'd try to procure one, or a reasonable facsimile. Also, where's the love for melee weapons? Leon gets his tactical knife, but nothing else. You think with the game taking place in a castle for a huge portion, that Leon would grab a mace off one of those suits of armor. Another option would be the stun baton from Resident Evil 5. Give me new ways in which I can eliminate the Ganados in a fun manner, and you can have all my money. Well, that just about wraps up this video. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit the like button, and let me know in the comments what you want to see in the Resident Evil 4 remake. Until next time, have a good one.